the real foundation of New Zealand criminal law, and I guess explaining that culture is not something that is defined in New Zealand statute of law, that within the 1961 Crimes Act and other legislation, culture as a concept is not defined, and that is kind of what underpins this whole piece of work, right? This piece of research of yours focusing on why we have to put more emphasis on culture and figuring out how to define it fundamentally comes from a place that it is not defined within New Zealand law, correct?
Absolutely. The whole thing about culture is that I could ask a whole room of people what their perception was of or understanding of what culture is. If I took a survey of their responses, I can tell you that everybody would have a different perspective on what culture means, what it represents to them, what other people's cultures are about. It's a concept that is difficult to understand, it's dynamic, it's eternally evolving. One culture may become something else in time. You might think that the academics have got it all sorted, but that's not the case. Back in 1952, a couple of very clever people looked into this and wondered how you could define culture. They went through, looked at what other academics were doing, and found that one academic discipline would define culture in one way, another would define it in another way, another would use different parameters to define. So it becomes quite confusing. We all have a general understanding of what culture is, but there's it's a difficult concept to define. You might be able to define it for a particular purpose, but when you actually look at what culture is, it's massive. If we go back to the criminal law, how the judges perceive culture, every judge has a different perspective, understanding of what culture is. And it's largely because there's no definition of culture in criminal law, no guidelines. Well, that's what I found in my research. You could have things like social media culture, office culture, army culture, culture of violence, all of these things. These are mentioned by judges in their decisions. But guess what? All of those things have no bearing on the final decision because there's no set rules about what culture is, how we apply it, and how we understand it.
And that's kind of the disconnect in New Zealand criminal law, right? Because there is no set definition that all the judges, for example, are referring to when they are pondering these decisions. As you mentioned in your PhD multiple times, the inconsistencies that come out of it and the ad hoc nature of how culture is applied to different New Zealand criminal law cases, as we'll unpack down the road. That is the nature of it. Because there is no definition, it leads to inconsistencies, and that is kind of the underlying problem.
No definition, no clear understanding, no guidelines as to what do you do with it? If you do have this understanding of what culture is, how are we going to how do we get the evidence about culture into a trial? Too many ifs, no answers.
And I guess some people might think, well, what does culture have to do with criminal proceedings? I guess that is, potentially a fair question. But an important, I guess, argument within your research is that culture being undefined is a problem because, as we'll get to, there can be instances where culture and cultural factors are important to consider within criminal trials. You mentioned culturally derived motives of a defendant is an element that has to be considered.
Everything you say there is absolutely correct. That's a good summary of it. There is an aspect of culture that I want to clarify. The confusion about culture as a concept is not limited to the criminal law. That's worldwide, it's universal in all kinds of fields, health, school, medicine. there are confusions. The reason why I've focused on the criminal law is because it's something I have a little bit of knowledge about, and because of my research, I've kind of developed that knowledge, and that's how I've discovered that there are all these issues. It wasn't just the little things that I was initially concerned about that got me going, but I've now found that actually these are huge things that can, huge confusions that can lead to inconsistencies, unfairness, injustices in the criminal law. I'm just doing my wee bit to kind of help resolve all of those issues. Yeah.
Thanks for watching this episode preview from Season 3 of PhD Unpacked. For full episodes, find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all other listening platforms. And for more content and tidbits, check out PhD Unpacked on TikTok and Instagram.